So today I'm going to be covering creating backgrounds for your mixed media piece. The beauty of mixed media is that you're actually working with layers. So your first layer is your background, and then you're working from the background up. That's what really gives mixed media dimension and depth and richness. So in my workshop, along with your materials, is that I provide a booklet that goes over very simple layout compositions. And this is what you integrate into your background. I cover symmetrical versus asymmetrical layout, and then I also provide samples of compositions that you can use as simple guides. Even if during the process you break out of the original layout composition, that's totally fine. This is really just to use as a foundation so that you have some place to start from. So today I'm going to actually be focusing on creating a background that follows this composition. Here's a sample of a piece where I just started the background, very simple. I put a pattern down and then I just get some color so that you are actually covering that sort of stark whiteness, blank look of your canvas. You're just trying to get a background color down. Here's another example. This is still the background layer. I placed images down first and then I start to cover it with color. And you can tell there's really not much to it. It looks like kind of a mix of everything. But remember, this is just the background. You're working from that, and then it'll start to make sense once you start moving into the collaging part and applying different techniques on top of that. So what I've done here is I actually have had a piece of MDF cut to size. I get these pieces pre-cut by my wood panel person, and the reason why I do this is because when you're starting out with mixed media, it's inexpensive. It's a lot more affordable to actually work on this stuff versus expensive wood panels. You want to, when you're developing your skills, you want to just even if you find scraps of wood, that is actually okay too. And then what I did is I went ahead and put 2 layers of gesso on that to give it a tooth so that the acrylic can bind to the surface. And even though I sanded, there's a little bit of texture in there. That's totally fine. Remember, you want texture in there. You want it to have a little bit of interest to it. So it doesn't have to be, with mixed media, you're not going for perfection. So with that layout, I'm actually going to go ahead and even put this down as a background pattern. This is just, again, this is just the background still. So I'm going to go ahead and start applying color. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. You want to just start creating some, it's almost like creating an atmosphere for your setting, you know, your the story. It's almost like creating a setting for your story. And that's kind of what is interesting about mixed media, is that it is a story, because it's capturing, your end product is capturing the process of what you're creating. Now, one of the things I like to do is use a sponge, because this is much easier to apply big areas of color. It also creates some interesting patterns. Now, even though I'm going to cover this side, I'm just going to cover the gesso part of it, even though I'm going to be gluing down that text that I just showed you. And just a reminder, you don't want to get into perfecting the color or your background yet, because remember, you're going to be painting over this. You're going to be gluing, collaging over this. This is still just a background. So you don't really have to apply a lot of paint on there because you will be layering, which will give it a substantial look to it. Okay, so what I do is you want to use a hair dryer or a heat gun to dry in between applications. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and apply this piece down. Now, one of the things I use is, you can use matte medium. I use this very inexpensive matte glue from Michaels. It's fast drying and it works great. I go ahead, I'll also get a squeegee to apply it. I got this from a hardware store. You can even use like an old credit card or a Starbucks card or gift card. So I go ahead and apply it on to that area, and you want to, with this stuff, you want to work fairly quickly. If you're using other matte mediums that have a slower drying time, that's that's fine too. I usually like to work much faster. That's one of the reasons why I use this type of glue. Again, I just layer that, and I take my squeegee and I just squeegee out the excess from the bottom, and it also flattens the whole surface, which is really good. So you don't get pools of glue or matte medium stuck in there. It starts to create a really lumpy look. So that's why I suggest squeegeeing out the remaining glue. Now I'm going to go ahead and create, actually apply this little piece of paper here. This is actually some handmade paper, and you can use, magazine cutouts, paper. This is still part of the background. And what I suggest with mulberry paper or handmade is not to use a squeegee, because once it gets wet, it tends to start to dissolve. So I just suggest using your brush to sort of press it down. You can tell here, see the fibers start to come out. So, and the reason why I'm putting handmade paper onto the surface as a background is this creates some texture. Okay, that's dried. Now what I'm going to do is actually, just to break up this, I'm going to go ahead and apply just a piece of tissue paper onto the surface as well. Again, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm actually looking for something interesting. It's almost like, that's one of the reasons why I always say we welcome accidents and mistakes to happen, because that's when some interesting things start to occur. Okay, now everything that I've applied is actually dry. So now I can actually start. What I'm doing now is I'm sort of playing off of this pattern and picking some colors from there. And I actually will start to paint directly over that. And then I will take up my wet sponge and sort of create this sort of wet look over that, because then it creates a translucency. I'll take a paper towel and start to wipe some of that paint off. And you can see that I'm not really adhering to the original layout. I'm just using that as a guide. And one of the things about when you're creating backgrounds is you can choose what you want to come out in the forefront, and like maybe this part I want to keep in focus. Maybe this part I want thoroughly covered. And you can see also that the text is really just becoming a background pattern and not a dominant subject. Now you can see in this section right here, as I'm brushing paint over that, that is actually creating a texture from the paper. That in itself is interesting also. So this really is kind of the basic background that I've created. I can keep working on it, but that, once that's dried, I can actually start to collage over that in some areas. I can actually start to hand letter over that or continue to apply paint. I can put found objects on there. But you can see that this is just really the foundation of the mixed media piece. So the next section would be collaging. It's starting to add collage over this.